Welcome to the PowettPlay Podcast, where international cricketer Kieran, Powell and marketing genius Shannon join forces, bringing you captivating conversations with the biggest players in cricket and business. Join us as we dive into the lives of current stars in the cricketing world, the legends before them, and those extraordinary icons whose performances changed the game in both cricket and business. Exploring journeys both on and off the pitch, the boardroom, and everything in between. Get ready for an exhilarating blend of cricket, life, and business insights, with two insatiably passionate, infuriatingly no-holds-barred hosts, who, unfortunately for the rest of us, live and breathe this stuff for a living.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 42 of the PowettPlay Podcast. I'm your host Jordan Shannon, and as always I'm joined by my co-host Kieran Powell. How are you, Kai?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you very much. Test cricket's back again after the 100, and I'm looking forward to seeing how England will go in the series against Sri Lanka. I think there's a big miss with no Ben Stokes as captain, but you know, the opportunity comes for Ollie Pope, really.
Interesting opportunity for Ollie Pope. He's someone that they've earmarked for quite some time, but I think also it's interesting opportunities for Dan Lawrence in the way of what's his name? Opener.
Yeah, with Zach Crawley missing.
Crawley missing, and obviously I think Matthew Potts has been named in the team as well.
Yeah.
So it's opportunities all around that are going to be interesting to see how people go about their task, because obviously Stokes has a particular style of leadership and play. So it's going to be interesting to see how England adapt without him, because they might be without him for maybe this series, maybe the next two series or so.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, with Stokes' injury, and I think we've spoke about it before, really, you've got to be, with the volume of cricket that's constantly being played, you've kind of just got to make sure he's fully recovered. You know, you don't want to be rushing things back and stuff like that, especially with what's on the horizon. So I just think that we need to take, you know, if it is one series, if it's two series, then so be it. But I'm interested to see how it goes in terms of, I think Stokes' captaincy is very much like, you know, he backs you. And I think that, I'm not saying that Ollie Pope won't be like that, but he's come out today and said sort of like, you know, Stokes has said I can do it my way. Well, that'd be interesting to see how it goes, because I think Stokes has put a lot of support within that group of players, and it might not be, you know, it might be a different thing with Ollie Pope, and it might have an impact.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it goes, as I said, because he hasn't really done too much captaincy before, to my knowledge.
I think he's done two first-class games.
Right, correct. So obviously, even first-class games is a completely different scenario to international cricket, and then a lack of captaincy experience on a whole. So there's not much to draw from. So I think he's going to have to lean heavily on his senior player group, especially if things get difficult for England and Sri Lanka manage to put on any big partnerships with the bat, or if they manage to apply any pressure with the ball. Yeah,
I think that's one thing that I know it's a different format, but I think there's 6 out of the squad can, you know, beat India in that one day series, and I think they'll be coming over here fairly confident off the back of that. I know it's not, you know, it's a different format from white ball to red ball, but ultimately I think, you know, whether it's, you know, like I said, there's a few groups of players who have played in that, but it'll just instill that confidence. You know, if you go and beating India, that's what it's about. You know, you're beating the best teams. And I think England, you know, with, you know, missing Stokes, you know, missing the change at the top of the order, I think they'll be looking to capitalise quite, you know, putting a bit of a display of performance, really.
Well, I actually met Angelo Matthews when Emma and I were out in Sri Lanka,
right?
And we spoke quite a bit about what, I guess, conditions were like in the UK this summer. Obviously, he was quite cognizant of what was happening with the England team and them being quite a new bowling attack.
Yeah.
I think, to add to your point in terms of Sri Lanka being confident after the back of a victory against India, when you look at the players that weren't involved in that test, ODI series, you're talking about very experienced guys like a Dennis Chandimal,
Yeah.
Angelo Matthews, the former captain, Dimut Karunaratne, at the top of the order. So these are all guys that are going to be heavily relied upon in the batting order. This is probably accounting for at least 35 to 40 test centuries between those lot.
Yeah.
And these are guys that have been around the world. They've played in England, and Angelo Matthews has captained the series victory for Sri Lanka and England. So these are very heavily experienced guys coming into a confident bunch, which is something that is always very good. It's always good to add that experience, and capitalizing on a weak English bowling attack or inexperienced English bowling attack at this point is something that they'll be looking to do, especially if the weather is such that it's bright, sunny days, the ball's not doing much, and you can keep them out in the field and keep bringing them back for second, third, fourth spells. Because as you saw, the ECB was quite cognizant of the fact that there's a series coming up and sort of pull guys out of the end parts of the 100-ball competition to further to sort of cut any risk of any further injuries to their squad. So they're mindful that guys have had a tough summer, and so the workloads that could potentially happen during this Sri Lanka series is already playing on their mind, especially if things don't go to plan. So Sri Lanka will be looking to capitalize on that front.
Yeah, definitely. I think the point you made there about that batting lineup from Sri Lanka's perspective and that inexperienced bowling attack, I think that's going to be a real key battle for the test match. I think maybe with the first test being in Manchester, I think that, the forecast is very mixed for the next sort of 4 to 5 days, which, it could be one of them where you could get, with it being in the Northwest there, the forecast looks like it's showery, but you could have a glorious day for 2 days on the bounce. It's just so hit and miss sort of things. And it could be, it could fall in favour of a certain side in terms of, if you win the toss and you think, it looks okay, we'll have a bat, and then next, 2.5 hours, 3 hours later, it's overcast and it's doing all sorts. So there's going to be elements like that. I think one thing that, from a bowling perspective with Sri Lanka, I think Jayasuriya, the left arm spinner, will give them that sort of stability from the one end. I know we spoke about it in the test series with the West Indies, the way that West Indies didn't really have that, where they could tie, let's go with the spinner at an end and sort of let's attack at the other, and bits and pieces like that. I think that Sri Lanka will have that this time.
I think that's very important as well, because you saw sort of what, and this is completely different series, but you saw sort of that role that Keshav Maharaj played in that recently concluded South Africa West Indies series, where South Africa didn't necessarily pick the strongest, or in my opinion, the best bowling attack, in especially in that first test match, for conditions in the Caribbean. And so Maharaj opened the bowling and just held one end consistently. And obviously, if anyone's bowling for an extended period of time, you will get wickets eventually. But what he did was allow stability and control from one end for the captain to rotate the other bowlers from the other end. And so if Jayasuriya is able to do that and just keep things tight, because the English batters are going to want to go at him and force them to bring back the seamers, but they're also going to be mindful of the fact that with Stokes missing, which is a left-handed batter to play against a left-arm spinner, they want to mitigate as much risk as possible as well, knowing that their bowling attack is inexperienced. And so I think someone like a Joe Root, you will see in this series in particular, look to take a very strong leadership role, minimize risk, and play the way that we all know Joe Root to play. And I think that you sort of saw that in the West Indies series as well. Like, he wasn't as advantageous as the whole bat ball era has been. He sort of reverted to more closer to what we know and expect of him. And I think that the entire batting lineup, barring Ben Duckett, who leaves 2% of balls as a test opener, which is absolutely crazy. Right. He's had such success doing that. I think everyone else will probably sort of revert to a more cautious role.
Do you think that would be this cautious role? Do you think that's with I think the impact of not having Ben Stokes in the team and it sort of reverts back to type, or do you think that it's just a way that maybe it's just the right way to go?
I think England, having analysed the way that they were initially successful under the Ben Stokes, Brendan McCullum era, after that England series defeat, would have realised that, okay, this one-size-fits-all style of play won't necessarily work against everyone and in all conditions.
Yeah.
I think pitches this summer as well, whilst they've been pretty flat still, they weren't as flat as last summer when you had the Ashes and guys could just literally play one-day style for the extended period of a day. The ball has done enough. It's not been doing much, but it's done enough to, I guess, keep bowlers interested whilst you're putting enough effort. So I think it's just a strategical move from the entire test team to understand that, we need to, I guess, tailor our method of aggression, still be positive, but understand situations and pick and choose when you want to attack.
Yeah. I'm interested to see the batting lineup as well. So who fits in where? I know obviously they said that Dan Lawrence will open up, but whether they move the wicketkeeper up further up, he said he's okay. We're potentially batting at 6, maybe too high. It'd be interesting to see how they get that balance right, because I think like he came in to sort of do this sort of style of shepherding the tail and sort of being a bit aggressive and stuff. But it'd be interesting to see where he fits into this really.
Well, who are the other options? Is it not just Matthew Potts coming back in for Ben Stokes?
I thought Jordan Cox had cut the last one.
He's named in the squad, but is he gonna play?
I'm not sure.
Because if it's Matthew Potts, I wouldn't reckon that they would put someone like a Chris Wokes ahead of the wicketkeeper, would they? Of Jamie Smith?
No. So they're gonna. No, so he would go with. And
if they go with Cox, then obviously they're going to be a bit light on the bowling front.
Yeah, true.
So it'd be interesting to see what they do, because I know that they have named Potts in the squad in the 11.
Yeah. Interesting. How do you see sort of like? I wanted to ask you this in terms of this first test, because the first test in Manchester, I do think it'll be a bit stop-starty, just the nature of the forecasting, like I mentioned before. From your perspective as a player, how much can that disrupt you from a batting perspective?
Yeah, from a batting perspective, it's the last thing you want, especially if you've just gotten through a really good spell from, let's say, the 2 opening bowlers, and you're looking to sort of see the next set of bowlers, but then the opening bowlers get like a 30-40 minute break, get a chance to refresh and come back, and you have to go and face them for another 3-4 overs each, so they get extended spells because they're still fresh. That puts you sort of as a batter behind the 8 ball of your plan and how you want to get through different bowlers' spells, so it can be quite frustrating. From a fielding bowling standpoint, the only thing is whether you switch on quickly enough after a break. As long as you sort of come back out and you hit the ground running, the guys are focused. Obviously, whilst there's a stop, you don't necessarily want to be 100% focused on the game. Whilst in the changing rooms, guys shut down, guys start doing other activities, relaxing amongst themselves. But once there's an inclination that play starts back again and guys come back out on the money, then it's always a lot more difficult from a batting standpoint to start back than from a bowling standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I'm looking forward to seeing is I know he bowled well at times in the West Indies series, Shoaib Bashir, but I'm expecting this experienced Sri Lankan batting lineup to play him a bit differently than some of the West Indians did, especially with them being used to playing sort of spin on a regular basis. And maybe not the height side of things that he sort of brings, but I definitely think that they'll have a plan of attack to really maybe put him under a bit of pressure early on, especially.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what field sets England go with as well, because if they go with quite attacking field sets and keep the men up, then I don't think that the Sri Lankans will be averse to hitting him over the top. But I think in particular, you'll see, depending on the lines that he bowls, a lot of sweep shots come into play, potential reverse sweeps as well.
Yeah.
So those, I guess those will be the areas that they target, either straight down the ground or square either side of the wicket. And that's where England will have to try and set their defensive fields and force the Sri Lankans to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's going to be. I think that's going to be a real intriguing battle. I really do, because I think that this experience side of things is what the West Indies didn't have. People who've played 50, 60 Test matches in comparison to, well, that's what the West Indies had combined, really, when we looked at it. So I think that this, the likes of Gus Atkinson, who had a good series. Don't get me wrong, but this is, I won't say it's a test because I don't want to try and hype Sri Lanka up too much, but ultimately, I do see this is where they could be challenged a bit more, really, in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's not even hyping them up. It's just plain fact that it's a lot more of a test because, as you said, like Sri Lanka's got multiple batters that have played over 50 tests. You've got guys that have played over 100 tests and coming up to 100 tests. So it's a completely different prospect. And you're talking about, as I said, you've got over 4 batters in that team with over 10 centuries. So very experienced batting lineup. And it's going to be a difficult task if obviously not based on what we saw from the practice game from the Sri Lankans, but timing the conditions, getting used to the environment, and more experienced players, you expect them to adjust and acclimatize a lot quicker to the conditions here than what the West Indies did.
No, definitely. And it's one for us to look over next week, really. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. But I wanted to get your thoughts, really, in terms of the state of the international and domestic sort of schedule. I know we sort of laughed it off a little bit, really, in terms of England's schedule a couple of weeks ago. But how would you recommend the ICC go about fixing this, really?
So this is something that I've given extensive thought.
Right.
I think that there needs to be an equal number of international matches played by every team.
Right, okay.
So Test cricket, for example, I would say that each team should play 12 Test matches per year. 6 at home, 6 overseas. Whether that is, for example, for someone like in England, if it's an Ashes summer,
yeah,
you know that is going to be pretty much your summer. So you can expect them to play, let's say, a warm-up test against an Ireland,
and then go into
whatever
5.
the case is, go into your 5-test series. In your winter time, you go on 2 to 3 overseas test tours, whether it is 2-3 test match series or 3 2-test match series, whatever the case is. But then that gives each team around the world an exact idea of, we're going to have 12 test matches, 6 at home, 6 away. And it's a rotational policy. So obviously over the course of, let's say, a 2-3 year period, everyone will have played everyone, not necessarily home and away, but everyone would have played everyone. And then the World Test Championship becomes a lot more evenly weighted.
Accurate.
It's not a matter of, right now, some teams are playing 5-match series, but others are playing 2-match series, but then each series carries the same amount of points. No, we will know for sure. Each team has played 36 matches. The top 2 teams are the top 2 teams because they've won 30 and 27 matches out of 36.
Yeah.
In conditions, home and away, over the course of a 3-year period. And then what I would like to see on top of that is the World Test Championship become a series as opposed to a one-off match, because that's the point of Test match cricket. Anyone can win. Not anyone can win, but you're talking about top teams here. It becomes a lot more balanced. So a one-off match for me doesn't do it. I'd like to see a 3-match series for the World Test Championship.
I think that's a definite thing to move forward. Is it needs to be a 3-match series.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking then about obviously the 6 and the 6, but putting my England hat on here, everyone wants to play England away from home. In terms of obviously wherever that will be, will that then see England doing, like you mentioned, so they'll do if it was an Ashes summer, they'll play Ireland, then they'll have the 5 against Australia. Do you see England then doing 2-2-2? So they do 3 countries playing 2 test matches. Now, does that sort of get away from the point of, I love a 5-match test series because it changes. It really does. You look when you get into that 3rd test match, you've got battles that are taking place. You've got, I loved the Broad and Warner thing in terms of that battle. He'd got him out and it became a real thing. And my concern with that shorter test series is that you don't actually get that battle side of things to it, and you don't get that sort of the storylines that sort of go with it. But ultimately, I really do agree with what you're saying in terms of having a set schedule, because at this moment in time, it's not working. It's as simple as that. It's not working. And we've discussed the test series, but we've also then got to fit in obviously this white ball stuff, which is the 50 over, which is really, really important to me, because I think we mentioned a few weeks ago about the Royal London taking place here. There's just no real value to that competition.
I think that to add to your point, it's only commercially viable apparently, and the stats say when England, Australia, and India are playing test series. So for the sustenance of the game, obviously, I think that the way that the ICC and the international boards distribute and receive funds are going to have to change as well. So, for example, I think the ICC gives 40 million a year to the West Indies. I know there's talk now of host boards paying overseas boards to come and play international cricket, especially test series in their countries. I think for some of these funds that are being distributed, I think that the ICC needs to, attribute a percentage of funds towards test match sustenance. So you may cut out, some of the funds that are shared to boards, or you may change the percentages that are allocated, because I think it's heavily weighted in favor of India, England, and Australia at the moment. So it would be a conversation to be had with those countries, because there's no point of Test cricket being played with only 3 strong nations. It's either you want to keep the game alive or you end the game. I'm all for keeping Test cricket alive. So I think that the way that the funds are distributed needs to be changed. But again, further to your point, and commercial viability, I also believe in 5 test match series, but again, it's not something that can work each and every time. So an England versus a West Indies, whilst that is a traditionally historic battle that has produced some of the greatest matches throughout the test of time, I think right now a 3-match series for something like that will be, probably more in keeping with financial sustainability than a 5-match series. Then another way that I would look at, sort of making the way that I see the scheduling going sustainable for more countries around the world, because countries generally only make money when Australia, England, and India tour. The countries that England are going to, Australia will go to a different set of countries, India will go to a different set of countries. So each country every year gets money from commercial rights of England, Australia, or India touring. So it's like a cyclical thing where it sort of starts to self-develop, self-sustain the ecosystem. And then you sort of working ODI series and T20I series around this. And then you're also working domestic T20 competitions around this. So you start filling out the calendar, and then you start getting a clearer picture of how things will work. And I think that this will be the most sustainable or viable option. And I think ICC and international cricket boards have to do some sort of intervention before the game cannibalizes itself, because T20 cricket is eating, and franchise cricket in particular is eating the game at the moment.
Yeah, I think you made some really good points there. And I think with that, what you said there as well can allow the scheduling to take place so everyone can fit in terms of domestically as well. You know what's set in. One thing I was going to say, do you think there's an opportunity for, I know they've done it before in ODI series where they've had a try series, so when England go down under, they play Australia and New Zealand on a series. Do you think there's a way potentially where you could incorporate that from a try series for Test cricket maybe?
A try series for Test cricket probably won't work because of the amount of time it takes to play a Test match. So
you're doing it in a way of day off.
Yeah, because then that sort of will take probably 2 months to get through a try series of Test cricket. But what can happen, and obviously now because you have a lot more specialist players, a lot of guys that play Test cricket don't necessarily play one day or T20 cricket anymore.
Yeah.
So you can have a T20 or one day try series happening somewhere else. Let's say, and I'm a big supporter of this. I've always told you this. For example, if England are coming to the West Indies, I always believe that Canada and the USA should benefit from that sort of tour. It might even be a quadrangular series where all four of them are playing in a series, and sort of get something out of it. Likewise, Australia coming to England, Scotland, the Netherlands, and Ireland should benefit from that as well. Because that only helps to strengthen the game, and a stronger game is more commercially viable for the ICC, and then that way we make more money. The game becomes self-sustainable, and it makes a lot of these problems go away once you have enough money to sort of give the developing countries and keep them interested in playing all formats of cricket.
Do you believe, obviously, the way you've broke that down there is, has been really good and really insightful, but do you believe that the ICC are probably, do you think they are looking at ways of making this work, or do you think it's something that's a bit, they feel that what they've got at the minute does work?
I think that they are looking at ways of making it work. I just don't feel that they're giving it enough of a priority, or they don't probably think that the situation is bad as it actually is. Until probably 3 years from now, we're sitting here and we're saying, can you believe that there are only 3 countries playing Test cricket? And actually waiting until the horse is bolted to say, let's fix it now. Whereas right now, we should start thinking about, okay, as I said, everyone has a set amount of Tests, ODI, T20I international matches. Whether it is 24 ODIs, 15 T20Is, 12 Tests, so you're playing X amount of days of international cricket. You can plan your domestic season around it. You can plan your franchise T20s around it. You can rest your players. You know that your players need to get through this type of workload. It's a lot clearer of a picture for everyone involved.
Yeah. And I think I was just thinking then, the way you brought, again, you mentioned there about the Tests and the ODIs and the T20s, is that way then I think it will have a massive knock-on effect to the domestic scene, because it'll make people want to play, because if they haven't, for whatever reason, they've missed a series due to, whatever that may be, they'll be desperate to go and play a 4-day championship game in early April, potentially, because they've missed that. So then they want to, they know they've only got 6 that summer. So, I've got some catching up to do. And likewise, if that's a white ball series they've missed, and I think that, over here in England, I think they've got to work out a way of figuring out how to make it work without having the 100 and the Vitality Blast and this, and this Royal London. Because in Australia, I'm not just saying it because, the way Australia go about it, but they have the Big Bash, which is superb. The way they market that, for me, it's brilliant. They have the Marsh Cut, which runs in with the way that Sheffield Shield runs, and it seems to go, it seems to work really, really well. I think over here in England, we just tried to do too much and, saturated at, what was quite a, it worked quite well, the Vitality Blast of the T20 when it first came in. But with the structure you've mentioned there, I think it will give more emphasis in each of the each of the domestic 50 over and the T20. Yeah,
100%. And it gives, as I said, a lot more clarity, a lot more space to plan your domestic seasons as well. I think right now in England, it almost feels like a money grab at the sense of the 100. You know, from my experience talking to fans, talking to players, it doesn't really seem as though many people necessarily enjoy it. People seem to enjoy the T20 stuff more, which is quite strange because all the marketing has been taken out of that and pushed into the 100, whereas people seem to just go to the 100 because it's the new thing, or obviously players want to play in it because it's a lot more money than playing domestic stuff. So I think that they don't need to reinvent the wheel. Put that energy and effort back into the 100. Give the other counties a chance to have representation, fans have association with a team. Privatize that franchise competition. So whether it be private equity investment or IPL franchises or owners from whatever leagues wanting to buy a stake in those teams, and build that competition up, build it up into something really strong.
Yeah,
that's what I would do with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when we had when we were speaking to Stuart Law a few weeks ago, he was talking about the Benton and Hedges Trophy, or when he was at Essex and winning that at Lords and things, on the NatWest Trophy, I think it was. Then that was like a real sense of, with the equivalent to like the FA Cup in football, it was that real sense of like the stages of the first round, second, etc., towards the final and this big occasion at Lords. And I think we've lost that over here. We've lost that sense of cup fever, or that real sort of cup feeling towards the 50 over stuff. And we've sort of lost it. Like, it's just everywhere, like you said. But one thing I wanted to quickly ask you as well is, the ICC, you mentioned there about obviously splitting the revenues to make it work for each of the nations and stuff. But one thing I really want to see is each of the nations sort of really work on the marketing of this Test cricket side of things and getting people back into stadiums to watch it. I think that some of the crowd numbers are down, but I think that the ICC can help people in terms of from a marketing side of things and really try and drive people going back to watching Test cricket.
100% agree with you. I think another thing that probably needs to come into play is ensuring that these Test matches are played over the course of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those need to be key dates within the Test matches. Whether the first match starts on a Thursday, as I said, or on a Wednesday and finishes on a Sunday, because then obviously it's travel, practice, play. So then each match gets pushed back by a further day. So you want to make sure that the weekend and the availability of people to come and watch the games is a focal point of your marketing, so that you actually do have crowd attendance, because obviously people have to work, and in various parts of the world have various different population sizes and socioeconomic differences that people have to factor in, and whether they are financially able to miss a day or two of work as opposed to not having to work on a weekend and being able to come and watch a game. So these are things that the ICC need to take into consideration, and domestic boards, when they are hosting for scheduling and putting on Test matches. Yeah,
definitely. Well, it is. It's something to consider, massively to discuss, because you think about this weekend, Test match starts tomorrow, so it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, day 4, day 5 on the Saturday, Sunday of a bank holiday weekend in the UK. So from my perspective, if you thought about that properly, you could go day 1 Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You think people have gone like, what we'll do 2 days. Or, and you really sort of get that. And I don't think ticket sales have been particularly great on the Saturday, which is the day 4. And that's probably because of that. And there's two things that have probably impacted that. One, the likelihood of it going to day 4, the way that England, the way that England have been playing as well. Not in terms of the, blowing teams away, but more the way that the way that they've been scoring and stuff. It's just not been getting to day 4 and things like that. And also, like I said, it's the way. I just think it's not planned right. And I think that if it could get proper tendencies there when it was planned properly. And I just don't think, I'm not just talking England here, I'm talking, worldwide. I think we're not really getting that marketing out there for people to attend.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, I guess, something that you can hold true to pretty much most of the world. I mean, England probably gets the biggest crowds for Test cricket. Australia obviously gets steady crowds during the Ashes series. Then it obviously increases more. India, depending on who they're playing in a Test match, get big crowds as well. But what I found really interesting is the crowds in the Caribbean for the T20 World Cup, the crowds in the Caribbean for the CPL, and the crowds in the Caribbean when West Indies are just playing a bilateral series. What needs to be done is a study and find whatever correlation there was between the crowds in the T20 World Cup and generally what happens in CPL West Indies games. That's absolutely perplexing to me. Yeah. So I think when you can start to draw correlations from each region as to what they're doing marketing-wise when they have their best crowds and when they have what becomes standard crowds now, which is pretty much empty. I think that provides a blueprint of how things need to go on a general basis to get bigger crowds out, because clearly there's interest there once certain events are on and the marketing of those events. So those need to be studied a bit more in each region and extract and extrapolate the best bits of information from that and use it as the blueprint.
What would you be your gut feeling in terms of why the numbers are different?
I think it's obviously one level of awareness. I think not just marketing, how you're marketing and where you're marketing is also important as well. You look at today's population and how they receive information. I don't think traditional means of radio marketing, for example, or on the television is going to necessarily do it. Traditional forms of media aren't really consumed as much by today's populace.
No.
I think that you need to go through social media channels such as Instagram, the TikToks, use your influencers, whether those be your players or I guess influential people within different aspects of society. So, someone in a few people in Manchester, for example, that are heavily influential on social media for this test match, people in London that have a wide user base for a test match at Lords, etc., etc. And that way that will drive a lot more, obviously, awareness and interest in and around the games.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned there about Instagram, I think that's one thing that the CPL do superb is the promotion on Instagram. Well, across all socials, to be fair, in terms of utilising, like you said, the name, so you're classing them as the influencers versus obviously the timeframes and the way that they play on the party side of things to it. Now, I don't, I appreciate that that's quite unique to the CPL, so I'm not saying that that's the blueprint necessarily to roll that out, but I think that what you mentioned in terms of this day and age and the way that people, from advertising side of things, I think that that's where that socials need to be used to drive people again to go and watching cricket, which is the big thing. Because if going back to our main point that we started at this, that if they're going to be travelling and we're going to be 6 test matches at home and 6 away, ultimately we need to make sure that whether that's Sri Lanka versus Pakistan in Galle, it's well attended, or whether it's England versus Australia at Lords, that goes without saying it's going to be well attended. It needs to be across the board that people are coming watching cricket, and whether that's with the education from the ICR help is given to help market, that's what needs to take place, in my opinion.
100%, and it could be a collective effort where all the marketing departments from ICC to each individual respective territory, along with the franchise tournaments, get together and say these are the best practices. These are what we find works in getting people out to attend the games, because ultimately, the more viewership you have for cricket on a whole, it benefits all the stakeholders. And so I think something like that will be an amazing effort to try and enhance each other's ability to continue to grow the game.
Yeah. And ultimately, like you said, there it helps everyone, but that's the big thing there, is increases revenue, which is what the key objective really, is to help, to be honest with you.
Yeah, 100%.
No, I think we've covered a few really interesting points there tonight, more, different from what we've probably discussed over the previous sort of 40 odd episodes that we've covered. And I think it's good to get your insight in terms of, the business side of things to make cricket work. And, we talked previously about, again, the chaotic periods of schedule and stuff, but to sort of take that step back, which you have done, and sort of look at it from a bigger picture has really been, insightful and knowledgeable from you.
No, I think obviously there are many different facets of the game that, don't get spoken about as much. Everyone sort of focuses on the players and the action on the field itself. But, there's lots of things that have to go into motion to sort of allow for the final end product to happen. And so I think that these are things that need to have a spotlight shined on them and sort of, I guess, put a firm emphasis on what is really needed from all the stakeholders of the world in the game of cricket to make the game continue to be such a big part of our lives. And obviously, you're looking at things like potentially going into the LA Olympics in 28. The game is still a growing sport. I mean, quite frustrating for me personally seeing breakdance in this Olympics and cricket not being a part of it, so I think things like that should continue to inspire everyone that's a cricket fan to want to help the game to grow more.
No, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining or for having a chat. It's been great, and I hope all the listeners and people watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you for joining us on the PowettPlay Podcast, hosted by Kieran, Powell and Jordan Shannon. We hope you enjoyed this immersive dive into the world of cricket and business, exploring the unique experiences and perspectives of players past and present, alongside those invaluable insights into intriguing business themes that transcend beyond the boundaries of sporting heroics. Be sure to set your reminders on your Alexa or Google Home device. Or we won't tell anyone if you still use those paper calendar things from a bygone era. Join us next time for more inspiring dialogue with scintillating minds on the PowettPlay Podcast.